playing a role in escalating conflict. How long do you think Ukraine could keep this up? I heard the World Bank predicted Ukraine GDP fell by 40% this year. I heard it was 30% first of all, and that is actually like kind of wild. That is not as bad as I thought it would be. China has been ambiguous regarding their current position on this matter. Their position currently is that they understand the interests and concerns of Russia, but have questions about the war, which they reiterated even in their recent SCO summit. Other countries have started turning on them slowly. Modi is in his meeting with Putin at SCO said, "This is not the age of war," which is a much stronger rhetoric than before. Yeah. Isn't Ukraine the one side that says there will be no negotiations, or is that just Russian propaganda? I mean, Ukraine has said that. Zelensky said that there would be no. Zelensky said that there would be no negotiations until there's regime change in Russia. But I think they're just trying to strongman. You know what I mean? I think he's just trying to strongman and come across like a leader that is under fire and under attack and create, I don't know, some level of oppose some level of strength, like show some level of strength against the invading force, and to say, look, we're still in this, fuck these guys, especially because it came on the heels of gigantic victories in Kherson. All right, let's hear what Vindman has to say about Putin's bridge response.
European Affairs Director for the National Security Council and retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, and Vice President of Strategic Stability at the U.S. Institute of Peace, as well as being a former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Bill Taylor. Alex and Bill, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Bill, I want to start with you with what we just heard there from Sergei Lushenko. This strike across these strikes with more than 80 missiles, we understand, all across Ukraine today. Do you see that as a sign of weakness?
It absolutely is, Alec. It's a sign that President Putin is desperate. He knows he's losing on the ground. He knows his allies are going away from him, both domestically and internationally. So he is in a real strain. He can't do things on the ground. All he can do is fire these missiles.
What do you think as you're watching this? Is it an inflection point, as you heard Sergei saying? Perhaps it is?
Maybe not so much an inflection point. I think absolutely Putin is lashing out. He had to respond somehow to this completely justified Ukrainian attack on Russian military infrastructure, because that's what that bridge is. It was built well after the annexation of Crimea to feed the military beast in Crimea. And frankly, in certain ways, probably to posture for what we saw, this large-scale war that unfolded earlier this year. So he was going to do this. These targets that we saw being struck are two categories.
I think Putin is striking in Ukraine.
Right. There are two categories. One is morale targets. That glass bridge is a beautiful bridge that kind of overwatches the Dnieper River. The other target next to the playground, next to the university, it's maybe 20, 30 meters away from where I lived when I was assigned to the embassy. These are not military targets. But there is also an energy infrastructure target that he's going after. And he was telegraphing that this is where he's going to go as we get into the winter. He's going to try to force the Ukrainian population to compromise, to give up territory by going after this infrastructure, these central hubs that feed the energy for the country. It's different than the way we have it here. You have one thermal plant that might feed half a city as opposed to individual heating. So he's going to go after these things just to make life miserable. And our role is, as allies and partners, is to provide Ukraine the air defense and the point defense systems that they can harden these targets with. And this is not a hard task. Some of these are going in. There is much more that we could do with regard to capturing these drones, these Iranian drones, and that's where we should be going to next with providing support.
Ambassador, just bouncing off of that, does anything change today in terms of the Ukrainian arguments to the U.S. and other NATO countries in terms of their requests for weapons? Does this move the needle on some of those bigger systems that they've been asking for repeatedly?
Well, Alex, I think it increases the determination.
It doesn't matter if they want to sell the Iron Dome to Ukraine, by the way. You know who doesn't want to sell the Iron Dome to Ukraine? Israel, motherfucker. What do you mean? This wasn't the first time that they brought this up. I think a lot of people forget that, like, Israel's a trade partner with Russia as well as Ukraine. So, you know, they're not... They were not a fan of that. This is not the first time that they brought up the Iron Dome conversation.
Of the Ukrainians to win this war. It makes them angry. They're enraged at this kind of. We talk to people who are there, and this is the response of the Ukrainians. They're going to win this war, and they need the weapons.
Don't say it. Don't go full Kanye. Wait, what? What the fuck does that mean? You think Israel originally fucking stating that they don't want Ukraine to have Iron Dome, because Ukraine to have an Iron Dome equivalent, has anything to do with like what Kanye West said, where he said he's going to go DEFCON 3 on Jews? That's wild.
They need the weapons that you just asked. They need the air defense systems. This is just a further demonstration. They've needed these before. They've asked for them before. We're starting to provide them. They need to come more quickly. So that's there. And going back to this question about what is Putin doing, all he can do is fire these weapons in. He doesn't have the soldiers. And so the Ukrainians now need also the armor on the battlefield to push them out of the country. The Ukrainians need to push the Russians out of their country.
Because not to minimize what we're seeing by any stretch, right? I mean, rush hour in Kyiv, playgrounds, yes, infrastructure targets, but civilian targets. At the same time, when you look at the damage that is being done, it is not something that turns the tide, which speaks to what Vladimir Putin can or cannot do. I mean, to what end? There is no strategic end
Terror
with what
campaign.
we're watching.
It's all it is a terror campaign. If both Bill and I have been on the ground in Kiev and in Ukraine since this war started, Russia really is a one-trick pony. It cannot do anything on the battlefield. It's getting defeated at every turn. The pressure is going to continue to really weigh down on the Kherson and the eastern campaigns. There may very well be another attack through the center, through Zaporozhye. But the only thing he could do in response is not on the military battlefield. He could terrorize the population. He could make it a miserable winter for the population. And he has a limited means to do that. He has a dwindling supply of cruise missiles. He now has these Iranian drones. Those are actually much, much easier to defeat. The cruise missiles fly faster. They have a difficult profile to potentially defeat. You need to have sophisticated military air defense. But for these other drones that the Iranians are providing, they're slow. All you need is kind of point defense around the critical infrastructure, whether it's city centers, whether it's thermal plants, whatever the case might be. We just need to saturate the environment there, and this could easily reduce the pressure that Russia is putting on Ukraine.
I mean, these guys have like personally played a role in doing exactly what they're talking about here with disdain, with respect to like, you know, countries that are overwhelmingly brown, right? Like, we all recognize that. I think that's not new. It's not even a unique take. And for those of you who are new here, I like to sometimes, bring America into the equation with respect to this, specifically so that people who otherwise do not recognize America's involvement in other countries as an overall bad thing, to finally recognize that it actually is. You know? Iraq comes to mind immediately, or Afghanistan, but certainly Iraq.
And make this a much, much more bearable campaign as the military campaign that's far more decisive turns and ends Putin's ends his aspirations for this war.
Well, it's clear he is trying to ramp up things for now, but how effective that's actually going to be, very much.
That's not whataboutism, you fucking idiot. You don't understand. You don't understand what whataboutism means. You just personally do not understand what you're saying if you think that that is whataboutism. I'm not saying what Russia is doing is right. You fucking dumbass. You're the one who's maintaining the position, though. TwitchCon, you look like a bully bitch. Aw. Are you sad? Are you sad that, like, in real life, you look like you and your fucking homies look like weirdos in real life when you behave like you do on Reddit? Aw. Your attitude sucks. It's like soft skin for a big tough guy. Bro, go take a shower. Okay? Hit the gym. Sorry that didn't pan out for people like you in the way that you thought it was going to. All right? Son, that tone sounds condescending. I am being condescending. So weird. People are like, dude, I can't believe we were trying to troll you, and then you reacted, and in that reaction, we kind of looked bad. Like, our side kind of looked bad, and I don't like that. I am being condescending. Think about your actions. Yeah. Anyway.
I'm gonna tell you straight up.
Wait, I'm fucking watching the wrong video. What am I doing? Oh,
Much remains to be seen. Of course, Ukraine is doing extremely well. Gentlemen, we have to leave it there. Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, Ambassador Bill Taylor, really appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.
And for more now on these overnight blasts, let's bring in retired Brigadier General Stephen Anderson. You, of course, your background's in logistics. So I want to start actually with what prompted these missile strikes, which is this bridge over the Kerch Strait that was struck, partially collapsed, maybe even deteriorating some of the rail abilities. What are the logistics challenges that were created with that may have spurred such a reaction from Vladimir Putin?
Well, thank you, Brianna. Well, this is hugely significant logistically. This bridge right here, of course, goes across the Kerch Strait. It's the only bridge that they've got that goes over that way. It brings rail, it brings road. It's the major lifeline for the entire Crimea Peninsula. So it's hugely important if they could take this out. I would not want to, though, overestimate exactly the significance of this, because they're going to rebuild the bridge. I think they've already rebuilt the rail. But I think most importantly is the psychological impact of this. It might not quite be at the level where the Moskva sinking was months ago, but this sends a message to the Ukrainian people, to the world, and to the Russians that they are very serious, the Ukrainians, about taking back Crimea. And they have the opportunity and the capability to attack a key logistics target like this bridge.
Yeah, it does feel like it's in the same vein of that Moscow takedown there. Now, logistically, for the Ukrainians, because we see Vladimir Putin taking out some civilian targets, he's also hitting civilian infrastructure targets. What does that mean for Ukraine?
It means that he's sharpening his focus a little bit. He's been very good at indiscriminate attacks. I've personally been to Bucha and Irpin. I've seen all the apartment buildings that have been knocked out. Heretofore, his attacks have been mostly targets that you and I could pick up on Google Earth, okay? But now at least he's starting to go after the logistics infrastructure, the energy infrastructure, and that's more important. This is a major response to the Kerch Bridge. He's trying to placate the hardliners that he surrounded himself with, and he wants to attack in a big way, and of course, this is the biggest attack I think we've had since the beginning of the war. However, I can tell you that the will of the Ukrainian people will not be deterred at all. Their resolve will be steeled, and they will continue to fight back. And the other thing I would say about this is his only play. I mean, other than the nuclear option, his only conventional capability are these cruise missiles, these long-range missiles. And I don't think he's got that many left. This will not continue for very long. I think that he did this as a show of force before the Security Council meeting with his ministers, but I think that it's going to be back to normal pretty soon.
That's a really important point, that he may not have enough to sustain this. Talk about this new commander. Nick Payton Walsh was mentioning this. New commander that he has in place. Are you seeing a new approach?
I do not think there's going to be a new approach because he's incapable of really doing a new approach. As long as the Russian army is what it is, which is a terrible army. I mean, now this guy is a hard dude, okay? He's responsible for the bombing in Aleppo. He served down, in Syria, conducted operations. He's been jailed twice. I mean, he's an interesting character, but he's a hardliner. And again, this is a way to appease the hardliners that Vladimir Putin has surrounded himself.
God damn, bro. They got the most thumb-like looking motherfucker up here, dude. They found the Thumbo. They found King Thumb. Thumbellini.
So he's got this guy in charge. But it's not like the soldiers are suddenly going to jump into a phone booth and come out as Supermen. They still have a terrible army. They're 10 years away from having a good army that can really take on the Ukrainians and achieve the military objectives they've wanted. They have low morale. They're indisciplined. We've seen all the terrible acts and atrocities they've committed against the civilians. They have poor leadership. They don't have non-commissioned officers at the tip of the spear. They're incapable of executing the military operations that Vladimir Putin wants to go. And I don't care if George Patton couldn't make this a success for Putin.
Yeah, it's a very good point. We've seen many commanders try at this point. General Anderson, thank you. Great to have your insights.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, we are barely 4 weeks before the midterm elections, and many of the key races could not be closer. Let's show you the latest CBS News.